Need it more than ever. And we're coming up in 4, 3. Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. What a joy it is to be with you today in this holy season. For those of us in the world of Christendom, it's the one of our high holy days, going into Christmas. The Savior who was promised to us, who's going to show us the way. And we just thank God for this season. And we thank God for all of our brothers and sisters of all backgrounds, all religious faiths, and those of you who are out of faith, but particularly for those who are in faith, because, this is a very blessed time of year, which Islam and Christendom and, oh my goodness, the Jewish faith coincide. And that's just what a beautiful thing it is. And someone who can help to explain all of this to us, I heard Bill Maher introduce Reverend Jesse Jackson this way, and I can't help but say the same of this gentleman who you are looking at right now. He's an icon of our religious, political, social, and cultural lives. The prophetic, the brilliant Dr. Cornel West. How are you doing?
My dear sister, anytime I get a chance to talk to you, I know I'm in magnificent shape because I'm reveling in the humanity of a member of a family of spiritual nobility of Jesse and Jackie and your magnificent siblings. Each and every one of you really such forces for good, especially what you have been able to do and are doing with your precious life, though. It's a beautiful thing to behold, and I'm just always humble to be in your presence.
Well, you humble me. Every time I reach out to you, you always make the time. And I've got to give a shout out to the beautiful Anahita, my sister, your wife. And I always reach out. She's like, my sister, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to get right back to you. And she does.
You
Oh
so
my goodness.
you so kind.
I love you. Everybody, we're on X. All at Santita J. We're on Blue Sky at santitajackson.bsky.social, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We're going to be coming up on Facebook shortly on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. But I want you to go to the YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And everybody like and share as we have this conversation with former presidential candidate Dr. Cornel West. What a year it has been. What a campaign it has been. And we want to talk about your campaign. We want to talk about what you saw, what you learned during the campaign. But more than that, where you see a country in our world right now. We're in such a period of tumult. And it seems that the boundaries of tumult, well, there are no boundaries. Everywhere you go, whether it's a war, they say that we don't have a hot war with Russia, but we actually do.
Mhm.
Tucker Carlson, whatever you think about him, he is there and he has said, we are in a hot war. We need to talk about it. And I'm inclined to believe him. Listen, I go beyond uh, the bounds of regular legacy media. I want to talk to everybody. I want to listen to
That's
everybody.
right.
I want to
That's
figure
right.
out what you somewhere between everybody. I'm going to get the truth. And we have got the Middle East, which is on fire. Um, it seems that there is just a lot going on. We've gone from Gaza to Israel to the West Bank to, well, what's going to happen with Iran? What's going to happen with Lebanon? What's going to happen with Syria? I mean, what is the sphere of influence of the United States and Israel? What is it going to be, and how can this really work? There's an old Arab expression that you cannot buy a house without first buying your neighbor.
Wow, I've never heard this. That's powerful.
Something that we learned. We got that from Chairman Yasser Arafat 50 years ago. And it's just
Mm.
true. It's just true. And the Talberts out of Liberia used to say the same thing. So let's get to it. So I have so many questions for you, but let me start with you. How are you doing? have you been able to decompress from this campaign and this presidential campaign, which was historic? And as I shared with you when you were in the midst of the campaign, my mother said, let him know how necessary it is for him to be running.
Yeah.
Because we need, one of the things, I have to just say this, everybody, I'm kind of fangirling right now, because when I was in college, you had some academic superstars, right? And chief among them was Dr. Cornell West. And everybody wanted to take a class. If you could run up, even if you had to sit in a class with one of your friends at Yale, you were going to try and do it because you wanted to hear what he had to say. Because when you go to school, and I think it's not whether you're in college or out, everybody, because I don't want to exclude anyone, whether you're in college or not, at 18, 19, 20, 21, 29, in your early adulthood, you're questioning everything. And some people begin to question their faith, and particularly in academic circles. You would never let us question that. You kept God at the center of the discussion and at the center of our lives. And I want to thank you for that, because you never, ever, ever pivoted away from this prophetic witness. This presidential campaign, what did you learn about
Mm,
America? What did you learn about yourself?
Well, it's a beautiful question, though, definitely. And it is true, my dear sister, that every day we wake up, we have to reconquer our own freedom, our own courage, so that we are renewed daily. We die daily to be renewed daily. That's at the spiritual level, that's at the moral level. And you can't do it by yourself. You have to have family, friends. You have to have a tradition that constitutes wind at your back. And you got to be true to yourself, true to your calling, true to your vocation. And I think one of the things that I was blessed to learn from these 17 months now, he says,
Mm-hmm.
it was 17 months, over 1,000 interviews, over 450 speeches, that on the one hand, I've met some of the most magnificent people I've ever met in my life, from all over the country, every corner of the country, from farmers in South Carolina to Mormons in Utah. I could go on and on. But I also discovered that the country is more spiritually sick and the system is more thoroughly corrupt than one would have thought. Now,
Really?
oh, y'all know would have thought, for example, the Democratic Party would spend over $20 million to keep me off the ballot. I just
Mm-hmm.
thought they had a commitment to democracy and all voices being heard and so forth. You see,
After our campaigns, you didn't know.
but I knew they were going to spend some money, but not that much money, because I figured, what kind of threat could I constitute? All I'm trying to do is raise my voice and bear witness and be a witness and provide people some choice or option.
That makes you a problem.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, because Reverend ran against the party. People keep thinking everything that he did, we were unwelcome.
Mm,
So unwelcome that in 1984, when the candidates walk out on the stage and
right.
everybody praised the candidate and the wives and the nominee and the wife, they wanted obviously my father to go out there, and my mother refused to go.
Mm,
And so these people are rushing. They're like, because the cameras were on, everybody's walking on the stage. My mother said, absolutely not. And my father knows not to press her.
mm.
And he turned to Jesse, Johnny, and I, and he said, babies, please don't make daddy go up there by himself. I can't.
Mm.
And our parents never opposed each other with us, because that's how you got into trouble.
Right, right,
If mom said no, don't go to daddy. If dad said no, don't go to her. Don't do that. Now, whatever they discussed privately, publicly with us.
right.
So it was, but in that moment, we went up on the stage with him. Jonathan and I went. I think Jesse did, but I know Jonathan and I did, because we held our hands as we walked up there. And I
Mm,
dropped my head and I started to cry, which is
mm,
something my mother never wanted me to do publicly. She said, if you cry, don't let these people see that. But
right.
I felt the weight of the campaign and the pain. And I also felt like I felt with you when as you were running, I knew that I had at least, you were going to say what needed to be said, which is what my mother and father were saying, because we sent you.
Mm.
We have leaders that have been presented to us now. And it's a difference between leaders who've been presented to us and those we send into the room.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's why they had to spend $20 million. And
Mm.
so when you were trying to vote for you, wait a minute, I gotta, where he's not on the ballot. Okay, so I gotta type him in. Okay, you gotta type 2 or 3 times.
That's true. That's
I
true.
go, okay, but that's the game, Dr. West.
Yeah. No, you broke that down beautifully, though. That's exactly right. It was hard to get my name and Sister Melina's name on a number of those. We did have the largest write-in candidacy in the history of the country when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to the presidents. We had over 25 states. That's owing to Kiana and Anahita and the others who worked so very hard. Brother Alex and Stanley and Bashir and the others. But your mother is such an exemplar of tremendous integrity and courage. Right in the middle of the debate, she said something to me uh, through you on your show a number of months ago. We was there with Brother Dwight. We praying for Brother Dwight. He's bouncing back
Absolutely.
in a beautiful way. God bless him. She said that you are holding up the position of Black people and our struggle. And it's a historic position. And I'm just so very glad that you're doing that. Not just because I have someone to vote for, but I know that all of the sacrifice, that blood, sweat, and tears
Mhm.
that goes far beyond language, that allows us to be where we are right now in our right mind with some sense of sanity and dignity, that tradition has to be reckoned with in this campaign, because everywhere I go, I always start acknowledging that tradition. When she said that to me, when you said that to me with her words, you'll never know what that meant to me. I would say that on subsequent speeches all around the country. I
Oh,
said,
well, she told me. She said, when he gets there, she said, and I want you to say that to him privately. And she said, and I want you to say it out loud
mm,
because people need to know.
mm, yeah, this room,
Because this was never a game for us.
that's right. That's
And I
it.
saw that this was not a game for you. You went to tremendous expense, personal expense. Um, and a lot of people really didn't understand what you were doing.
No, that's
Um,
true.
I mean, because the Democrats went through, they did everything they could to push you and Robert Kennedy off of that stage. And I said, how can you fight for democracy when you're fighting to keep people off the stage?
That's true.
So I mean,
That
but how did that make you? I mean, how did you, when you saw that happen? How did you pivot?
Mm. Well, I just became more fortified. I said that I'm here to talk about poverty. I'm here to talk about mass incarceration. I'm here to talk about decrepit school systems. I'm here to talk about indecent housing. And I'll speak to those issues even more forcefully and intensely as they attempt to silence me. So it became really a matter of increasing one's strength rather than feeling one's strength diminished.
Mm. So, what to you? What are the issues that you really feel? Well, what are the issues that just to go back over this? The issues that you really, really work to put into the conversation. What were they? And because to me, as we look at what's happened with this Luigi Mangione,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I just read his manifesto, which the corporate media have worked very hard for us not to read, but they excerpt it, they read it, but they don't want you to. I said no, so
Mm,
I posted it today. I said
mm,
no. I said no. You read it
wonderful.
and you decide because what he was saying, and I would never, ever, ever, Dr. West, say that it is right to kill anybody. And my prayers and my thoughts go to the family of Brian Thompson right now, because I can only imagine, as someone who lived with the constant threat of assassination, what his family must be feeling at this moment. But I also wonder about the families who've been denied coverage
Right. That's
at,
right.
at the same time.
That's exactly right.
And you uttered the unutterable during your campaign. You talked about the most marginalized people. And so to me, when they were pushing you off the stage, they were pushing the poverty conversation off the stage.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
healthcare. So why did you even? What issues were pushed off the stage, Dr. West?
Well, you rightly note that I began always with stress on truth, justice, and love that begins with an abolition of poverty, an abolition of homelessness or unhousedness. I begin with an abolition of police brutality. I begin with an abolition or fundamental accountability of organized greed at the top, of greedy bosses and greedy employers who treat their employees as if they are afterthoughts or as if they are objects and commodities rather than precious human beings. I begin so that I come out of a rich Black freedom tradition that when this sister Harriet Tubman talked about slavery, she wanted the abolition of slavery. She was willing to go back, of course, and 19 times and bring back as many as she could. And of course, she reminded us I would have been able to bring back many more if they had known they were slaves psychically. So she knew there was some internal struggles that we Black folk had to come to terms with in terms of really wanting to get off the plantations, which is a mentality, which is a psychic and spiritual condition. And then at the same time, she says, but I want the abolition of slavery. And so Martin Luther King, he didn't want a liberal version of Jim Crow, Jane Crow. He wanted the abolition of Jim Crow, Jane Crow. When Jesse Jackson ran in 84, ran in 88, right? He wanted the abolition of poverty. Same issue I was talking about 40 years later. And so those were the issues of mass incarceration. I want the abolition of a mass incarceration regime, which is a crime against humanity. There's ways of rehabilitating people. There's ways of turning their lives around, but not solitary confinement, which is a form of torture. And of course, disproportionately chocolate, disproportionately Black. And so those were the issues that I was highlighting. And when I look at where the country is now, with this rage and this anger, especially having to do with the arrogant, the greedy, the unaccountable, and the condescending ones. The unbelievable anger at elites. That Trump, in many ways, convinces many working people and lower middle class people, as well as he's got his xenophobes and racists and so forth, but he's got a heterogeneous group. He convinces them that he is fundamentally committed to the abolition of their social misery, when in fact he's going to be reinforcing. We're going to discover very, very quickly he can't deliver. There's no way he can deliver on what he's claiming, and the people are going to find themselves even more frustrated. They're going to find themselves even more angry and full of rage. And the only way you speak of that anger and rage is tell the truth about it.
Do you think that the Democrats offered a message that countered that?
Yeah, no. I think the Democrats ended up just as weak as Priest-Weed and Kool-Aid. When you think that Liz Cheney and her father somehow are going to be a major forces that help you hit the tape in the finish line, you're living in a different world. So what every speech that you and I even talked about it months ago, right? Every speech I give, 62% of our fellow citizens living paycheck to paycheck. And you think that Liz Cheney and others are going to be the ones to push it forward because you're taking for granted the Black folk, you're taking for granted the poor folk, you're taking for granted the working class folk. How come? They have nowhere else to go. So I don't have to worry about them. $1.2 billion our Sister Harris had. and you're still $20 million in debt. I had 1 million for 17 months, and I still owe 90,000. But with those 1 million, we ran out of cash, but never ran out of gas.
Mm.
Always full of fire every day, every week, every quarter. Why? Going back to what your precious mother said. See, we come from a tradition where we can do a whole lot with little. We don't need a whole lot of money to tell the truth. We don't need a whole lot of cash to bear witness, prophetic witness. You see, sometimes we don't even need a whole lot of encouragement as long as we got our souls intact with a relationship with a mighty and loving God and memories of grandmamas and granddaddies and mamas and daddies who loved us in such a way and gave us a joy that the status quo can never take away. And that's the status quo in media. Thank God for your voice and the others in media. And as you know, brother Tabit's got his new lineup now with your Jesse,
Mm-hmm.
with your brother, and
Mm-hmm.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and Nina Turner, and it's gonna be rich. And we add, Dominique and the others are already there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a matter of saying, you know what? This resilience, this resistance will never be crushed. And even when you kill us, the spirit of Santita and the spirit of Cornell and the spirit of Martin and Fannie Lou and Curtis Mayfield and Nina Simone and Aretha and Luther, and we can go on and on. Those spirits will always be here as long as human beings have any concern about truth and justice and love.
We're talking with Dr. Cornell West about his presidential campaign, about what he learned during the campaign, about what people are wanting, what Americans are wanting, uh, and these wants, these desires, these needs cross all ethnic boundaries, all racial boundaries, all economic boundaries. I mean, and we see that if I can even pivot very quickly to uh, the corporate media are very shocked. They're surprised that there is
That's
so
right.
much sympathy for this 26-year-old Ivy League graduate from an affluent family who was making a statement about healthcare in this country. Now, mind you, and they keep saying that, we're trying to find a motive. Everybody knows what the motive was. Do you agree with with the taking of a life? No, you don't. And I repeat, we all pray for Brian Thompson's family and for his soul, quite frankly. And we pray for all people who feel, all of those executives and all of those employees who are feeling less secure today. But United Healthcare had twice the denial rate of the industry average. So this is a problem.
Mhm.
This is a real problem, and they're missing, or should I say, they're misdirecting us, Dr. West,
Mhm.
because they don't want to have that conversation about the bankruptcies in this country that are being driven by healthcare costs, these phantom bills that you get. Once you think you pay into a system and you think that once you paid your copay that you're done. No, that's just the beginning.
That's the truth.
What about that? I mean, because it's healthcare. Give me, because you started off with love and truth and justice. I mean, because you start off with that. Where is that? Where are we with that? I mean, what is how do we approach this particular moment with this particular issue? Because uh, this young man had an outburst yesterday. He said, "Look, this is an insult to the American people." I paraphrase him. He said,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're going against everybody's lived experience." Because even though from an affluent family, he's from a wealthy family, that wealthy family's wealth can be drained by someone's catastrophic illness.
That's true.
That
That's
means, so I'm just trying to ask you, I mean, just what, how are we supposed to handle this moment? Because you have a man who's dead, but then you have a lot of people who die or who are suffering
that's
because
right.
their coverage has been delayed, it's been denied, is being debated, is being adjudicated. I mean, what are we supposed to do with that, Dr. Webb?
Well, when you got 75,000 or so deaths that are directly accountable to not just the denials of health insurance companies, but the relative indifference of those in high places in the healthcare industry as they walk off with their high profits and wealth, and everyday people are going to funerals with tears. Now, there you're talking about a system, and I'm with you. I think it's a very Christian and a moral thing to always accent that you don't want to kill innocent people. That's just a fact. There's no doubt about that. When John Brown went in and started killing slaveholders, he ended up killing some innocent people. I've always felt he was wrong to kill the innocent people. That doesn't mean I don't understand the spirit of John Brown. He was fighting a vicious system. And there's no doubt that the healthcare industry in the United States is a greed driven, corporate dominated industry that does not put people's needs over their profits. It's profit over people's needs. So when Bernie and others ran for Medicare for All 2016, of course, I was blessed to be there with him. 2020, blessed to be there with him. That what he was saying was that we've got to be able to put people's needs at the center. Now, of course, when I ran just a few months ago, same point. Medicare for all, like in Norway, like in Sweden, like in other civilized modern nations that are fundamentally concerned about satisfying the health needs of their people before they have to make big profits. We haven't made that move in the United States. The greed is too deep. We've got a vast majority of Americans who say over and over again in the polls, we want Medicare for all, but we can't get it. How come? Because our politicians are bought off. Because big pharmaceutical companies give hundreds and thousands of dollars to politicians who vote in the interests of the pharmaceutical companies and the big money and not everyday people. That's both parties again, Democrats as well as Republicans. That's white, brown, black politicians, as well as women, male, gay, lesbian politicians. It's a class issue. And the only way you hit that class issue head on is political, moral, and spiritual. You got to tell the truth. You got to keep the love in it. But when you love the people, you hate them being treated unjustly. And I think what we're experiencing in the nation now, I think this is just the beginning. I mean, the anger and the rage that we're seeing, this is just the start. I'm
What
telling
do you
you.
mean?
That is to say, we're entering a historic period in the history of the American empire, whereas Malcolm X says the chickens are coming home to roost.
Okay.
You're reaping what you sow. Now, what chickens was Malcolm talking about? Organized greed, weaponized hatred, routinized indifference to the suffering of vulnerable people. And if people don't listen to the effects and consequences of a system, not just domestically, but internationally. We'll talk about foreign relations in a second, right? Where you think that, in fact, precious human beings are nothing but just collateral damage or just somehow an afterthought on your profit margin as you calculate more and more money and more profits for you. Sooner or later, you're going to have to come to terms with that reality. And it spills over into very, very ugly forms. There's no doubt about that. That's what John Brown was saying in 1859, right? 165 years this past week that he was executed. He said, America, you're going to have to deal with these chickens coming home to roost. If you make fundamental social change impossible, then more and more violent response will be inevitable. And we keep our moral compass. We don't justify killing innocent folk, but we also have a sense of reality in terms of how any set of human beings whose backs are pushed against the wall in the end will come out swinging.
Well, what about, I mean, so how are we to view what happened in New York a week ago? I mean, because you see the pundits on television, um, they're not, they excerpt the manifesto, but they
Mhm.
have not read, they have not, they don't even print the whole manifesto because they don't want you to read it. They want to read it and then serve it back up to you, right?
Right. That's right. That's
And
right.
they don't want to, they don't have, or should they barely have any pundits who say murder is wrong, but denying and delaying people coverage is wrong. I was reading a story today about a family who tragically lost their child. And as the child was dying, they said, well, we're going to donate their organs because something good has got to come out of this painful moment. Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield gave them a bill for $3,150
Mm.
because they refused to pay cover the removal and of the organs of this child to save someone's life. I mean, Dr.
Wow.
West,
Wow. Wow.
how does that? And then the day that this man was killed, the same company, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield in 4 states, they were going to limit the amount of anesthesia that you get during
Oh,
surgery.
Lord have mercy. Oh, Lord.
Doctor, now mind you, as soon
Ooh-wee.
as this man was killed, they said, we've rescinded that. We're not going to do that. I'm like, but you've been thinking about, you've been trying to do this all the time. You've been fighting with the anesthesiologist. How? What do you tell people to do to fight that? Because to me, that's my pastor used to talk about wickedness. There is something called evil, Dr. West.
Oh, absolutely. That sixth chapter of Ephesians, the wickedness in high places.
Yes. I mean, what do you say? I mean, how do we fight that? Did you get the sense that people, as you watch this rise, this mounting anger, do you
Mhm.
get the sense that people are more willing to fight, or have people given up, or are they just looking for some? What did you see as you've been?
I think there's confusion. The dominant form, of course, in the mainstream is capitulation. What you're talking about in terms of corporate media, they could sit there and say it is wrong to kill this particular innocent person. Let's say in this case, the CEO.
Mhm.
That's right. I agree with you. But you can't say it's wrong for 75,000 people to die because of the greed of the health industry. They will not say that. They'll say it's wrong for there to be Israeli hostages in Gaza, but they'll never say it's wrong to have 23,000 babies killed in a matter of months. So it's clear then that there is a narrow framework for what they say is wrong. And people see their hypocrisy because there's no consistency, there's no constancy there. They can't tell the truth across their silo. And this is true, it could be whatever, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, all of the various corporate folk. They all have their little narrow frameworks. And they'll point out the hypocrisy of one side and never see the hypocrisy of themselves,
Mhm.
which means they're not telling the truth. Because the truth is always jagged edge. It cuts in a whole lot of different directions. And so I was blessed really to see, the response of a number of people in terms of their hearts, minds, and souls saying, good God, we are glad that there's a number of folk. And there's always a cloud of witnesses of various colors and genders and sexual
Mhm.
orientations that's out there every generation. But it's very small. It's very small. There was just a few thousand abolitionists in the 1850s. Just a little small little group of,
Mhm.
and then of course the major abolitionists were the enslaved Africans ourselves. We're the ones who wanted abolition. We had an abolition movement on the plantation, but we
That
just
part.
couldn't get moved. And we had a whole lot of Negroes on that plantation who themselves were capitulating, who were collaborating with the slaveholder and trying to convince the black folk that all of their freedom had to do with their movement on the plantation rather than getting off the plantation. And what we saw with Brother Jesse in 84 and 88 in many ways was the Democratic Party plantation. And folk thinking as long as we moving on the Democratic Party plantation, we free. No, don't confuse moving on the plantation with being on the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman had a whole different conception of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can go to the top of the plantation. You're still on the plantation because you're still not running things. You're still capitulating. You still don't want to tell the full truth. And in the end, of course, you're still just scared and intimidated. You don't have enough courage to tell the truth and to execute the truth in terms of the seeking of justice for the least of these, for the poor, for those who are marginalized in very, very ugly ways. Even in this moment, in terms of our precious trans folk, all of the vicious attacks and demonizing and degrading of our precious trans. I say, in the name of Jesus, in the name of love, I'm going to defend all marginalized people, no matter who they are, because they're made in the image and likeness of a loving and almighty God, and we should never lose sight of their sanctity, no matter what their orientation is, their color, their gender, their national identity, and so forth. That, for me, is what it means to really bear a serious prophetic witness. And we have to be consistent with what does that mean then? You're going to be misunderstood, misconstrued, lied on, attacked, rebuked, scorned. That's what the calling is. You know what I mean? There's
Mm-hmm.
no quest for any kind of prophetic witness without a whole host of wounds and bruises and scars. And the Jackson family understands that better than most families in the
Well,
American empire.
well, then what do you make, just given? Because I think I see a sense of betrayal out here.
Oh Lord, yes, that's true.
And
That's true.
so, so when you see that sense of betrayal, how are you seeing it manifesting? You're seeing it manifest with young Luigi, but I think, do you think you're also seeing that? Because I would never make the case, and I've said this, and it's gotten me into, well, not even difficulties. People have not liked it. Some Democrats have not liked it. I said I will never argue for you um, to remain with a party. But see,
Right.
when I was growing up, I said my father and Bill Singer broke into the '72 convention, and they had to put down, go against the biggest mayor, the most powerful mayor in modern American history, Richard J. Daley,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to open up the process. So the Democratic Party's never been friendly to us, but people forget just who Ronald Reagan was in 1984.
That's the
This,
truth.
this man opened his campaign. One of his opening campaign events was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where they killed Goodrich, Bernard Cheney. He
That's
didn't
right.
run as a Republican. Are you kidding? No,
That's
he didn't. He,
exactly
remember,
right.
he didn't even know who Sam Pierce was, his black Secretary of
I
Home.
know. In
Remember
line, shaking hands in line, didn't know who his black cabinet
that?
member was.
Cabinet member, you were like,
That's right. I remember
wow.
that.
You remember that?
Oh
So,
Lord, Lord,
oh,
Lord, Lord,
look,
yes.
this
But the
that's
history of the collaboration is a long one. Brother Marshall Hatch, who I love so deeply, senior
yes,
at New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church. I just saw his 74th anniversary sermon. That was powerful. And he
yes.
was telling me one of the reasons why Brother Martin was in the west side of Chicago rather than the south side is because Daley had bought off and co-opted so many of the black preachers on the south side of Chicago, and he had to go to the west side where much more newer migrants from Mississippi and so forth. And Martin said, I always want to be with the folk catching hell whose backs are against the wall. And the black leadership, they had bought off Daley. Daley had concretized his co-optation program. I'm telling you, and we see that now. But see, people are tired of it though. Selling out has become so normal. Selling out has become so naturalized,
Mhm.
especially among black leadership, that people just really believe that being a black leader is just showing up and being in the spectacle rather than bearing a cross and being willing to live and die and tell a truth that cuts against the grain. And that's always been a challenge, but it's even more of a challenge now because the burden now is it's something that people don't understand as well. So when you and I'm much older than you now. I just want to be honest about that. Everybody needs to know. But, but when you and I were very small, and we see Martin and Fannie Lou and James Lawson and Diane Nash, we knew that these folk every day were putting on their cemetery clothes and were coffin ready. Because you're not going to tell the truth. You're not going to tell the truth about the vicious legacy of white supremacy unless you're willing to die. It's just a fact. It was just a fundamental fact. You see, that's one reason why there was a certain understanding across ideology, from the Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam, to Baptist churches, to AME churches, to Pentecostal churches. You might have deep disagreements with each other, but everybody who's telling some of the truth about the vicious legacy of white supremacy, they knew they were subject to vicious attack. It's impossible to be a truth teller and not be subject to vicious attack. Well, most leaders these days, they don't want vicious attacks with Santita. They just want acceptance. They want some money. They want status. They want visibility. They want mobility. And so they want, in so many ways, the spectacle without the spiritual substance. They
Well, then,
want
are
appearance
you a
without.
leader then?
Hmm?
Well, then, are you a leader or are you a personality?
This is what happened. You end up being a truncated celebrity. That's what you end up being.
Truncated?
A
Oh.
truncated celebrity. Now, you take a celebrity like Muhammad Ali. One of the reasons why we love that brother so much was what? Was he a celebrity? Absolutely. Was
Hmm.
he a personality? Absolutely. But what else was he? He was willing to pay a cost.
Hmm.
He was the most hated man in America when he refused to join the army in Vietnam. He was the most hated man in America when he joined the Nation of Islam, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and so forth. But he was true to himself. Now, 50 years later, he's a hero to everybody because he's
Hmm.
one of the greatest athletes in the history of the species. You know what I mean? But he was himself. He was consistent, and that's the thing that the younger generation is hungry for, I think, but they don't see it enough in my generation. See, my generation ends up a generation that, in so many ways, we just got, for every courageous truth teller, we got at least 10 sellouts.
Wow. So what do we do? I mean,
Tell
because
the truth.
if ever we need people to hold up the bloodstained banner,
That's
it
right.
is now.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly.
So what do you do? Because I think that we have moved into skin politics.
Mm,
Because now, you know, and I've seen us, and it's interesting because I know these people. I mean, I've known them a long time. I mean, I've known the Obamas a long time. I went to high school with Michelle. I was in their wedding. I get it. I don't talk about that.
mm,
I don't talk about people I know because I think that's
right,
inappropriate. I went to
right.
college with Kamala. So I get it. But the thing is, I can't. My mother said we can't become skin worshipers.
That's right. That's,
You
that's
know,
idolatry. That's idolatry to the core.
idolatry. So just to have someone a black face in a high place, no, and that's not helping us. In fact, we've been hurt. And I'm trying to find out how do you see that, and what do we do about that?
Yeah, we just have to, lead with love and tell the truth. What our dear sister Harris tells us, that the greatest story in the history of the species, the story of America, we just got to say that's a lie. That's idolatry. That's not true. The greatest story in the history of the world is not the American story. I mean, I'm a Christian, so I start with Jesus. But there's a whole host of other stories that are greater than America. America's had wonderful people and magnificent persons and so forth. The greatest privilege in the history of the present moment is to be an American. That's not true. The
Mhm.
greatest privilege in the world is to love and be loved by God, by a person, by mama, by a grandfather. Quit lying. That's idolatry. This is what I think your mother means when she says
Mhm.
this skin pigmentation worship is idolatry. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean we're not proud of our beautiful blackness. Of course we are. But the question is, what is the moral content of it? What's the spiritual substance of it? What are the political consequences of it? We can love Clarence Thomas's beautiful blackness and go at that brother tooth and nail because of his lack of deep sensitivity and solidarity with poor and working people and black people in regard to policy. And we can argue over the policy, but this sense that somehow just a black face in a high place is fundamentally all we need is a form of idolatry, and it leads people off a cliff. We see it with we saw with Obama, you see it with Harris, it leads people off a cliff. Now people say, well, that's the best we could do at the moment, pragmatically. Then I can understand, then we can have an argument. But at that point, we're not just talking about skin pigmentation. We're talking about strategies. We're talking about tactics. That's a different thing. That's a very different thing because you got a lot of people who critically were critical of the system who did vote for Harris. I disagree, but I can understand that. But if it was only because of her skin color, then that's a form of idolatry because the system can produce all kind of black folk and keep Jamal and Letitia on the block in the hood in the most oppressive conditions because Letitia and Jamal's conditions do not surface if all you're looking for is just a black face in a high place. And in
So,
the end, it's only the black middle class in significant ways that benefit from that, not the black poor and working people here and around the world.
do you think that was missed during this campaign? I mean,
Oh,
because I thought,
absolutely. Big
talk
time.
to me, because I said,
Oh,
look,
I gave you
first of
a
all,
great example of it, even my own campaign, because I had, of course, I had some wonderful people. And like I told you before, my volunteers were just off the chart. But when Sister Harris came out, shoot, I looked around, especially my black religious supporters. I looked around and it was almost empty. The day she announced, boom, they gone. They jumping on the bandwagon. I said, well, what about the genocide? What about mass incarceration? What about poverty? Is she speaking to those issues? If she's speaking to issues, I can understand. Because, see, I don't believe you got to follow me. I ain't no Pied Piper now. No, 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 no. I'm a jazz man. I just lift my voice just like everybody else. You know what I mean? If
yes.
Coltrane's playing at a club around the corner and Coleman Hawkins is over here and Billie Holiday is over here, go check them out too. Don't just go see Coltrane. Coltrane will say that himself. He ain't the only voice out there. There's a whole lot of rich voices out there who got a whole lot to say. Listen to some Ben Webster. Brother plays so sweet, he make you hug a gorilla. Coltrane can't play that sweet. Everybody know that. Everybody know. Everybody got their voice, their own features, their own distinctive characteristics. But if the only reason why you're leaving the campaign is just to be with Harris, where all the black folk and the money is, I said, well, dang, did you really understand what our campaign was about?
Well, did they?
Well, it's a good question. I'm praying on it.
I mean,
Good question.
or did they want another black face in a high place?
Ooh, ooh, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
and I mean, and are we not? Have we not fallen too? I didn't say fallen for it, but fallen also,
yes.
because now we are doing and we're becoming what we did not like, what we hate, what we say that we hate. But
That's
I'm not so sure that that we didn't that this is not where we've wanted to be. Because we've wanted to, um my heavens, I'm wondering if we wanted to, did we want to end slavery, or did we just want to get out the fields?
mm,
You know,
ooh,
because we've made several shows and we've written books about Sally Hemings, but not so much about Harriet Tubman.
I know, I know.
Uh,
Or
you know,
Sojourner Truth either.
uh, you know, the,
Yeah, that's true.
we the people who are darker than blue. The ones who
Yes,
went through the mud, but the one who
yes,
sat
yes,
in the
yes.
big house, who went to the White House, but J.D. Callender chased her out of D.C., Dusky Sally, but she was a quarter black. Maybe. I mean, I'm trying to
That's,
make some sense out of this because as I'm seeing you running and just offering up this voice, I saw you and Robert Kennedy going like this. What is happening here?
mm,
Because these Democrats pushed him out the party, and
oh,
they pushed you pushed you too. I said, what? I said, how do you? And they continue to get the weakest candidate and push it, and then
yeah,
they cancel the primary. What
yeah.
am I supposed to do with that, Dr. West?
That's well. It just shows that when you have big money, when you have arrogance, and you think you can get away with anything, uh, you attempt to do it, and the Democratic Party tried to do it, and then it fell back on black folk and said, well, okay, had lied about Biden as long as they could. Well, he's sharp, he's serious. Even Sister Harris said he was so sharp and serious. We knew that he didn't have both paddles in the water. We said that then, we said that now. He didn't have both paddles in the water. Everybody knew that. Please. We were born at night, but not last night. You can see that. And the Democrats run around lying. Oh no, behind closed doors, he's rigorous and very, very subtle in his thinking. Please, please,
Did you say
please.
he didn't have both paddles in the water?
He didn't have both paddles. And he had that one paddle, and that thing was just putting along itself.
I,
And that's one reason why they didn't want him to be public too often. And in the debate, it was clear. But even right after the debate, you remember Sister Harris went on and said, well, he had a slow start, but he had a magnificent finish. He came on strong. I said, Sister Harris, did you just see what we saw? What are you talking about? Quit lying about the brother. Well, she wanted to be loyal. We understand that. Loyalty has its role. But truth in the end, you would think ought to have some place, some status, some gravitas alongside loyalty. Now, when they hand the baton off to her, and believe me, it's a wonderful thing. Anytime I see black folk full of joy. It's like looking at these the DMV senior dance folk. They grooving, they moving. I get into that. I love black joy. I love black love. I love to see black people smiling, like at a concert when Mary J. or Maxwell is singing and everybody's grooving together. Frankie Beverly talking about joy and pain, and everybody in the stadium is just grooving. That to me is sublime. Well, that's what they wanted the Harris campaign to be. They wanted joy. It turned out to be cheap joviality. It ain't the same as joy. Because joy
what?
go hand in hand with pain. Joviality ain't got no pain in it. Joviality is Disneyland. See, Disneyland ain't got no pain in it. There's no grief in Disneyland. Nobody dies at Disneyland. When Frankie Beverly was talking about joy and pain, he was talking about nobody's known the trouble I've seen. Nobody's known the Jesus. Nobody's seen the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. That last line is joy, because the joy comes out of wrestling with the trouble, comes out of wrestling with the catastrophe. So when we see black music expressing a joy, we know it's coming from a deep grief, a wrestling with tears and so forth. Church is the same way with James Cleveland singing those songs. We know that joy that's coming out of him and Charles got everything to do with the grief that they're wrestling with. And when you shift from genuine costly joy to cheap joviality, you know you're in Disneyland.
We're talking with Dr. Cornell West here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Stay right here.